All right. Um, I hope this is working. It told me that um, my children are still here, offering me their help. I probably need their help, but I'm refusing it. Um, so this said it's not going to be recording, but I'm sure it's recording to YouTube. So whatever. Uh, what are we talking about? This is hello, Dolly. This is Sandy. Good morning. I tried to. I'm trying a new tactic. So the title of this, which is "Love Covers a Multitude of Sins," is the unity, the label on top which my mosaic vision is going to be laid out, and then in the description, hey, what's up, parku, Anthony. I don't. So tell me if that makes sense. So in the description, I lay out a bunch of. I lay out the multiplicity of this unity, of which this live stream is hopefully a body for, I suppose. So, let me see where to start. So, let's start in time. So, I've been interacting with Cal a lot, obviously. Mandy, can you quickly explain mosaic vision? I can try. So, I have on my channel, these are some of the earliest videos that I did. Some of the earliest videos I did on my channel were me trying to describe things that I always talk about, which are mosaic vision and and probably seeing is not seeing, which is kind of the same thing. It's related to iconic vision, which this video will probably get into. And mosaic vision and iconic vision are kind of the same thing. They're a little bit different. Um, and it's hard for me to even describe these things, and they're my own made up terms. So, mosaic vision is basically the idea of like a mosaic. I should try to find. Everybody knows what a mosaic is, right? It's like an old form of art or icons where often the way that I grew up with them is like you would take in elementary school, you'd cut out like a bunch of pieces of like magazines, and you'd glue them all together into a larger picture. So you take a bunch of smaller pictures and glue them into a larger picture, which sometimes it can be really cool. Ancient mosaics were built upon like pieces of glass or tile. Tile work can be this. You can make mosaics out of tile where you take little uh, solid tiles or even little tiles with patterns, and from that you fractally create this larger pattern, this larger picture. Or you could think of it as like a tapestry. You know, you're interweaving these single threads, but from the unity of all the threads, you get a bigger pattern, a bigger image, a unity. And it's more than the sum of its parts, Leonard Cohen. But and this is where like emanation and emergence all come in. Like, is it coming from a top down consciousness idea, spiritual reality, this intangible field of potentiality, or is it emerging and evolve? It's both simultaneously. So when you're weaving on a on a loom, I guess, or creating a mosaic, it's both. It's both created and you're remembering into the potential of the future. So that's the emanation part of it, but it's also this emerging reality as you're building it. Um, Yeah, or Anthony says mosaics are often on the floor. The whole pattern can be seen from a high point, but you could have them forever. Actually, there's some really pretty ones in Minneapolis. I'm thinking right now. People will not know this. I think it's on 11th Avenue in northern South Minneapolis, right south of downtown, which is close to like if people remember the riot, the what would you call them? The peaceful protests or the riots or whatever you want to call them from a few years ago, post George Floyd. There are these right close to they were on Lake Street, but also like Lake Street, Franklin Street. These are these big major east-west roads in southern Minneapolis. So they're right there. There's this wall on the west side of the road as you're traveling south. I believe on 11th, that has these beautiful mosaics laid out. I think on the side of a bakery, and they're really really cool and beautiful. Minneapolis is a city that does a pretty good job with caring about beauty, actually. So those are mosaics. Um, Dolly, my mom and I went to mosaic to surfboard. That's probably sweet. So, so like South Africa, surfboard, sharks. I don't know. I have a fear of sharks, snakes, sharks, and I used to joke about this when I was younger. And then tall women used to scare me, like Amazonian women, which was kind of a joke. I was saying that tongue in cheek. And so I used to joke in college that like that was my like archetypal fear was just like a giant Amazonian woman riding a shark with like a snake lasso. Um, all right, personal story there. I'm also cramping all the time, so prayers for me because I'm asthmatic and I've been having bad breathing that I haven't really had since I was a young child. And my what would you call him? Pulmonologist, my asthma doctor, um, pulmonary doctor, got me on this inhaler that I've never used before, and somehow the way that I don't know, it uses potassium in some way that essentially makes like the rest of my body realize like it's not having potassium in it, like my muscles and things, and then I cramp up everywhere, and it's terrible. So I'm going to stop it, which leads me to one of the quotes, I guess, from my description of this larger mosaic. Um, and I don't know this is true. So here we go. This will start me back up on a larger circle because the circumambulator, uh, Neil, our friend Neil, if you're here, he posted a couple comments saying, well, okay, this will tie a few things together. Saying that the way that I think and the way that I talk reminds him of Jung because he's read a lot of Jung. Neil popped into a conversation, and Chad had a randos conversation with him a while back. Because he says Jung, in most of his writing, except his autobiography, he would circle these points, or he would circle a topic, and it's very very notes from a tilt-a-whirl. It's this book that has really affected the way that I see things. Is like a tilt-a-whirl is a carnival ride that is laid out like it's laid out like the solar system. So it's a a center around which a ball around which other balls rotate, but they are also rotating. So it's rotating around a rotation, and then that theoretically is rotating out in the Milky Way galaxy. So it's rotations upon rotations, and everything's spinning at larger and smaller uh, radii. Um, and so this guy wrote this book like that, where it's probably actually the origins of a lot of my personalist way of thinking because it's big and small. And that's like one of my Lucasms of when I talk about anything, I'm talking about everything. Or that quote that I heard initially from Rogan, which is, I don't know, he's a Japanese guy, but like once you see the way broadly, you'll see it in everything. Or Christ consciousness, I suppose, is that when you see, when you start seeing unity other than division, and you prioritize that, you can see the unity in anything. So there's a kind of being in the world. Again, it's Vervaeke's adverbial versus the adjectival versus the mere static label that we put on things that doesn't save the appearances. You can see the world in a way and act in the world in a way that prioritizes the unity over the division. And I think that is the kind of being in the world that coheres and is a movement toward life, Christ consciousness, versus the kind of consciousness that sees division, sees difference, which is analysis. It's like what C.S. Lewis said, it's trying to understand biology by vivisection. You have to kill the thing to understand it. And I think that mode of being in the world is murderous. It's fundamentally murderous. And so if you think you need to divide things, if your mode of being in the world is to divide things to understand them, I would say it's fundamentally an antichrist way of being in the world. And so okay, so um, circumambulating. So I like to circle out to big philosophical topics and then circle into how that has personal application. So what was I saying before? I was going to connect all these dots. The point, Barbie, Neil. Um, and so interestingly, Sam, my buddy Sam, who I don't think watches these, Sam Tiedemann, he's been the last two live streams with Paul. He's our resident little corner biblical Unitarian denier of the Trinity. He sent a message this morning about his sister watching Barbie, who's very different than him in ways, but still a sister. And she also thought that it didn't stick the landing, like Sam said. It didn't have a point. And back to Neil's comment is he said, the masculine tendency, or as I would say, the honest postmodern critique of modern objectivism and rationality is to always be looking for a point. Like, what's the point? What's the intention? What's the authorial intent in Scripture? What's the narrative? What's the point? What are you trying to say? Whereas the feminine is much more. It's a leaning into the question. It's very. I mean, Rilke, even though he was a man, this is what he always said. The point is to live everything, or like, don't try to seek the answers. Like one of my favorite quotes from Rilke in his letters to a young poet. But he's like, don't try to. It's super close to like my George MacDonald quote that I love all the time, which like the fact is no man understands anything. Is that you Rilke says like don't seek the answers which you couldn't understand now even if you had them, but lean into the questions. And then perhaps one day you'll be able to live the answers. And he says because the point is to live everything. And so question the I don't know. This is honestly why I think a lot of people didn't really like Rob Bell, because Rob Bell was basically like within the evangelical world was the incarnation of that. Because I just actually got at a local little bookstore here with or not a bookstore but thrift shop with my friend Jens. Uh, it's Christian adjacent. It's kind of a Christian ministry, and I found a hardcover of Love Wins, which is a book that I don't have, but that's Rob Bell's book where John Piper famously, at least in these circles, tweeted after Rob Bell came out with that book. He tweeted, "Farewell, Rob Bell," which okay, so like that is an iconic moment, and there's a lot in that. There's a ton in that if you have eyes to see. Rob Bell wrote a book about hell, which asked a lot of questions. It actually didn't. You could say of a book of Rob Bell, and this is always like more masculine people's tendency. And John Piper, I've heard him say this. He's like, this is the problem with postmodernists. Is he's like, it's like nailing Jello to the wall. Again, a really useful illustration. He would say relativists or postmodernists or whatever. And like, listen, I understand this from like the more foundationalist, rationalist frame. Like Paul Vanderklay always talks about like the postmodern or the foundationalist postmodernist debates, which would a lot of them are still rooted. Like David Bentley Hart said, most postmodernism is really veiled late stage modernity, and I think it's true. That's the dishonest postmodernists. And so like, but back to Piper, right? Farewell, Rob Bell. And postmodernism is like nailing Jello to a wall. Why would you want to nail something to a wall? Again, with a point, right? Symbolism happens. Um, what are you trying to nail down? And this is well, forgive me, this is a joke that I like to make, but like Jesus is hard to nail down. I actually just saw this. Where was that? Somewhere the other day. Shoot, I don't remember this. But then again, this is another piece of the mosaic that's coming in. It was talking about, oh man, it was something in this little corner, something somebody shared with me. It was in writing. I remember it was in writing. It wasn't something I heard or watched, but it was talking about Jesus versus Paul, or Jesus was fundamentally like, this is the thing. If you're hyper masculine in the way that you approach Jesus, you're wanting to pin him down. What was Jesus actually saying? What was his point? Good luck. Jesus asked a lot of questions. He was very slippery. There's even that verse that says Jesus did not, what's the word? Jesus did not reveal himself to them or open himself up to them. I would say Jesus didn't really trust them because he knew it was in the heart of men. Like, which interestingly, like, I don't know, I just made this connection. It's very Jordan Peterson in his response to Christians, self identifying Christians. Again, I'm going to use that term, who really want to pin him down on what do you think about the resurrection? Because again, these are foundationalist, rationalist Christians. They have a literal, historic, critical approach, scientific, objectivist approach to the Bible. They're biblicists in a scientific, objectivist mode. And so they want to go to the Bible and say, and they talk about the physical resurrection of Christ and what that is and what it means. And they think they understand it in a encapsulated, totalizing, absolutizing way. Again, watch Peter Rollins, the fundamentalist episode on postmodernism. Is that's the honest postmodern critique, is do not absolutize your narrative. Do not invert credo and religio. And so when Jordan Peterson is not, when he is refusing to answer that question, what he's doing is he is not like Jesus. This is what I would say. He's not giving himself to you. He's not playing your game. He can see what's in your heart. He knows the game that you're playing, and he's saying, I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to do that. I think Jesus did the same thing. Which I almost I would bet a lot of money. Like I would stake most of what I have on it. If Jesus was alive today, foundationalist Christians of every stripe, foundationalist religious people, which is pretty much most of the modern world, because that's my point of like the colonization of secularity, post-Christian secularity, Tom Holland, the the unconscious because like that's what secularity is, right? And the Western world and liberalism. It's Christian values without the self-identity to the historic dogma, right? But it's still Christian, because it's just like the golden rule, loving people, protecting the victim, protecting the innocent. Like that's Christian, right? And so that's like the world. That's the game everybody's playing. So all right, going all over the place, losing my track. Okay, let's circle back. The great evangelical inquisitor. Yeah, totally. Okay, let me look at a few nails. Jello is not to be nailed, it's to be eaten. Or do you drink it? Depends on how well you made it, I suppose. Um, dialogical versus propositional. Theology as poetry can a poem be inerrant? Yeah, exactly. And I still need to watch these videos, but so Ted S, who's been doing the Dante series on Grail Country, recently had his poetry conference in Arkansas, and they've been releasing those videos. I think he has some of them on his channel, which is like the Golden Thread or the Golden Echo. It's even better. Echo, resonance, memory. Um, so okay, let's find our bearings back. John Piper, point. Yeah, point, masculine, circumambulating. We're finding it again. Rob Bell, asking questions. There's a terrible video, by the way, of Rob Bell on. So Paul likes Justin Brierley and Unbelievable, and he started some new podcast now, which Paul says is like his new favorite thing. There is on YouTube a Rob Bell interview with, let me think the guy. It's on Unbelievable. It's back in the day after like most of the stuff was happening. It's about hell. Oh, good. Is it with James White? Oh, it's maybe James White. James White. God bless you. God forgive you. I would seek to forgive you for the way that you've portrayed yourself, but you are an exemplar of one of the worst versions of this rationalistic Christianity that I can imagine. Just like one of the worst. Uh it's not good. Like Ken Ham. But there's more nuanced, elevated versions of it. It's all the same thing. Um, so Rob Bell asks these questions because he's not seeking an answer. Now, here's the thing: to steelman the point that more conservative, left-brained, whatever you want to call it, evangelicals, biblicist, foundationalist, rationalists want to make is they would say something like, uh, "Is it possible to circumambulate and circle around things and not give any point, not give any definitive, hard answers, to be soft and fuzzy everywhere as a tactic to manipulate in a See, I would in an indirect way influence in an indirect way, but is manipulative and ultimately malevolent. Yeah, well, that's the malevolent feminine. To manipulate and to seek to control in an indirect way is the malevolent feminine. To seek to control in a pointed, aggressive, assertive way is the malevolent masculine. Control is the unity behind both of those things, and you can do it in a feminine way and you can do it in a masculine way. Um, all right, so let's get back to the title of this thing. Um, Anthony, right. You have to remember the great fear of conservatives is a sneaky liberal. Yeah, and there's so much psychology going on in this. It's like Jonathan Bijot had a great video on this that I spoke with a lot of my friends about. He said, what did he say? Symbolically, the fear of conservatives is the chimera. This like, what is that thing? Like you can't. It's a it's like what's an example of a chimera? Like this is where I don't understand mythology enough. Like the Sphinx or like any mixing of all these different things together, and you're like, what is that? I can't understand what it is. A trans person, like those kinds of things like freak out conservatives because there's like, what is it? I don't have categories for it. But then the fear of the liberal is the, what did he call it in that video? Um, oh shoot, it was good. It was really good, and I can't remember it because I am. This would be my fear because I'm more of an intellectually liberal person. It's a oh man, I can't remember. That's so good. I gotta find that now and remember who I was talking to about that. It's probably, yeah, it was Jason and Cal and that whole thing. I'll find the video and put it in here at this timestamp, whatever it is. How long have I been doing this? 22 minutes. Note it. 22 men. Chimera and what? But it's what liberals fear. It's essentially like a monolith, a totalizing thing, something that is like it's complete uniformity. It's the Borg. It's for me, it's groupthink, in like a modern sense. Like what's funny is like modern day liberals and progressivists wouldn't think of it that way because they are siloed in groupthink anyhow. Because the unity behind both conservatives and liberals in modern American politics is uh, that they're all conservative and they want to exclude the outlier, whatever the outlier is, which is whoever is outside their confession of moralism, right? Um, so, but it's something like that. But there was a really great uh, like archetype for what he was talking about. I can't remember what it is right now. All right, let's get back. I'm gonna put out a an invite. I think this is more the unity type vision, but it's a unity without diversity. So it's a monolith. It's a fake unity. It's a uniformity, and unity and uniformity are not the same thing. Because in order to, it's like what I say is like, what is the unity behind any distinction? See a bub, kid going to school. Uh, so oh, sorry, never mind. So there's always a unity behind any distinction. So this is something that my buddy Cal in his most recent podcast, and this wasn't what you were talking about, Mandy, but I'll use it to illustrate a point. Anytime you can distinguish anything, there's always a unity. So like Todd McGowan in this lecture, somebody left a comment a while ago that like a lot of what Peter Rollins is always on about with like his Hegelianness and what he's talking about, and Cal spoke about this in the way that I talk recently, is I'll say I'll predicate something, but I'll also put the apophatic, the negative, the unspoken within any predication that I say. So whatever, that's complicated language. So I'll say like Luke is a man. But within that, because this is the Maximus identity of identity and non-identity, or the Tao, or whatever, is the pole or the relational opposite, the unspoken, the reality is a coincidence of opposites. Nicholas of Cusa. Whenever you say anything like Luke is a man, I would say that I would say like Luke is, and then parentheses, I would say not a man. And Peter Rollins does that all the time, but he particularly did that in a book that's called How to Speak of God. But in the title, he says how to not speak of God. And Todd McGowan in this lecture, which I didn't know I was going to bring this up, but I could have put in the description. It's Todd McGowan on Hegel, and there's two parts of it, something like that. But he says in implicit, again, in the feminine, the unspoken, the not articulate, the space around any predication, Luke is a man, is the opposite. And memory is part of that. Again, remembering. Back to my last live stream, which was a lot about memory and Augustine and Memoria and the David Bentley Hart quote that's in the last live stream. It's in the description if you want to look at it. But to say Luke is a man, you have to know what a woman is. Man is nonsense without the memory of a woman. And which is a great Noah Gunderson song, actually, like I Need a Woman. God, Noah Gunderson. I'm gonna put that in here because I love Noah Gunderson. And I actually saw Noah Gunderson live for the first time. He came through Minneapolis last year. He didn't play long enough, sorry, but it'd be hard being a musician going city to city. And for the kind of person he is, it would be soul draining, life giving in a way, but kind of soul draining because you're performing a little bit. And I really, really, really want him to sing this song, which I'm going to blank on right now. What is it? It's from his Lover album, and he wouldn't do it. Little Cup. And it's not like one of his popular songs. He's not overly popular anyhow, but like, man, anyhow, I need a woman. To understand what a man is, you need to understand a woman. And this is the problem. This is the intersectionality problem of the trans conversation is, right? Like I don't self-identify as being a man, or I don't, cancel me, whatever. I don't self-identify as being a woman. I don't feel that way. Okay, valid. But then the problem is like you can go out of the frying pan into the fire. So then are you the opposite? So like if you're not a man, are you a woman? Or like gender is a construct, right? So then why do trans people want to go, like and when you go to a drag show, why is it the stereotypical opposite that a trans person at a drag show is? Like why is it the stereotypical woman? But I thought you said that wasn't a woman and that's just a social construct. So then why when you become trans or dress up as trans or you do the opposite, you do the stereotypical opposite? Like, can you continue phenotypically or in your outward appearance be a man but then identify as a woman? Or, like that's all a complicated conversation. But the problem with intersectionality in that is they're not acknowledging this. They're not acknowledging that the opposite is embedded within the reality of anything. Life and death, day and night, light and dark, sun and moon. Um, all of reality is that way, and it's embedded in it. You can't avoid it. You can't, because it's memory. You can't get away from it. I challenge you to think of and this is a little bit what Jordan Daniel Wood is getting at with Maximus Christ consciousness, the Christologic of identity and non-identity. You can't escape it. This is a piece, this is paper, this is a notepad. When I say that, everything that is not a notepad is included in it indirectly. Okay. Back to the title of this, love covers a multitude of sins. Let's try to bring it down. Let's try to bring it down to earth. So I was talking to Cal this morning, and one of the things that I love to do is I love to go into verses like this. I used to do it. I did it in the last live stream with 1 John 2 because we were talking about they went out from us because they were not of us, and I love to just dive into the infinite pool of the words and the Greek or the Hebrew, because Barfield calls language, uh, he would say the memory of consciousness is embedded in the fossils of language, words. You could think about that like a geologist. When you are doing like philology and the study of words, within those words are embedded potentially ancient consciousness or potentially latent consciousness, which is very connected to the. There's too much stuff to talk about, which is very connected to the Jordan Hall conversation with Vervaeke this morning, because they were talking about what's the title of that. I don't have the title of or I don't have the description anymore in StreamYard of my title. What's up? The Sphinx, ooh, is the Greek myth, is the daughter of the Chimera. Interesting. Those are facts I don't know. Thank you for that up. What's up, Matthew? What's up, Kyle? So the Vervaeke conversation was about, what was the title of that sucker? it was about the evolution of consciousness, but it's about new frameworks and integrating new frameworks. Yeah, because they were talking about how does a new they were talking about it in terms of frameworks, but I think you need to get outside of the framework again of frameworks because the whole framework of frameworks is wrong. I think I actually can't think intellectually that you can save the appearances if you're within the mode of framework because it's a binary thing. Perhaps unless we get some psychotechnology or way of seeing in the world that gives us calculus that gets you to where you can find the integral and the area under a curve using finite infinite points because that's where infinity and finitude start to collapse into the unity that's behind them, right? Because there's always a unity behind any distinction. Infinity, finiteness. You can't understand infinity without finiteness. You can't understand God without creation. Yeah, I would say so. So more children. Chitlins. Okay, so Barfield, study of words, going into words. There's the remnants of history. That's their fossilization. You know, you can go back in time and look at the etymologies of words and see how those have changed and evolved over time. And you can peek into an ancient consciousness. I wouldn't say you could fully understand an ancient consciousness because that requires initiation, and you aren't there. You know, they are there. You are where you're standing. So you can't understand where they are standing fully because to understand it fully is to be it. Ooh, timestamp that. 3130. Cal will like that. Cal, 3130. To understand something fully is to be it. Because so like in order for love, this is what Cal will say because he's been saying recently, right? Forgiveness, to completely empathize. What are you saying to me? Oh, my daughter is apparently pointing out my verbal tics because I say right too much or something. In the comments, say if you disagree with my daughter, if she's wrong about me. Right? Um, uh, so, oh, that distracted me again. Oh, Cal. To understanding something completely is to be it, because that's because you don't understand something without initiation. So, in order to fully empathize with something, this is where love covers a multitude of sins, right? So, I was talking with Cal this morning. Cal's what Cal's been saying on his podcast recently is this: to know, or there's this quote, right? To know all is to forgive all. Oh, that's a good quote. To know all is to forgive all. I'm writing it in here. I think that's right. And um, and so when you love, you are. I don't want to go into the words yet. I do want to go into the words and the study of the words of that verse, right? Because this verse for today's stream, "Love covers a multitude of sins," is from Second Peter. Let me see. Yeah, the First Peter 4:8 is the verse. And okay, so Cal is saying basically like to judge, right? To judge someone is to say essentially, if I were in their situation, I would have done differently. But what Cal is pointing out is like that's an incorrect statement because if you were completely in their situation, if you had all of the constraints on you that make them them, you would be them. You cannot to get outside of that is to say to judge is to extract yourself, it's to divide yourself from them. But then you wouldn't be them. So you actually can't judge them because to judge them is to divorce yourself from them. But if you were them, which is to understand them fully, to know something fully is to be it. If you were them fully, you would be them and to have all of the constraints on their life. You know, think of it. The infinite qualifications and constraints on them that make them them, their body, every choice they've made, their family, their language, forever. If you had all of that, you would be them. And then if you were them, you would have done what they did. To judge them outside of that is that's why that like tattoo is actually really accurate. Like no one but God can judge me. And then in the end, I would say that God's judgment of you is your own self-judgment, and that is identical with your own creation, which is your own self-creation, and then the lines between pantheism and panentheism really start to blur. All right, let's go in the verse. Marylander, good to see you here. Got to be careful with ontology. Yeah. Was the title of that video Practical Ask? Are you talking about the Peugeot video? I don't remember. Might be. Uh, thought thought you want to give us Mosaic vision, thus descend the mountain and bring us the law. The problem. So this verse, I want to quote one of my favorite verses, and then I'll go into the First Peter 4:8 verse because, and then I'll put out the thing. Sorry, I'm just having lots of thoughts here. Um, First Timothy 1:23, I believe. I think I actually know the reference because I've thought about this so much. The law is just if you use it lawfully. Adverbs. Or, as St. Paul says, the law is the law good? Is the law bad? Well, the law is a pedagogue. It's a schoolmaster. It's the bumper rails in the bowling alley to keep you between the lines, to lead you into maturity. Or as I've often said with my son, like my son has the rule, don't hit your sisters. But if my son, when he's 25, needs the law, don't hit your sisters, to not hit your sisters, I've failed as a father. I haven't taught him how to love. I haven't taught him wisdom. I haven't taught him the intangibles. He has not saved the appearances of the law. He's still a child. I think I just spit. He's still immature. He still needs milk. He's not ready for steak. You know, okay. Let's go to love covers a multitude of sins in light of like you can't judge people, and Cal, and then I'll put the link out. So man, so I do have the link to the lexicon where I typically go to online when I'm doing these word studies. So like you can just type in a Bible verse and then type lexicon, and then I think it's a Bible Hub link, and you can go to all these things. So, and it's just fascinating. There's a few words that I would encourage you to really look at, and look at the Greek, and look at. And again, this is infinite translations. Like at any level of this analysis, save the appearances, because again, right? Everything is an icon. I'm an icon. Words are icons. This is get more of my iconic thinking. We need to think about labels and words as icons. They are portals to new worlds, and they're infinite new worlds. So, like when you look at a verse in the Bible, again, that verse in the Bible, that predicate is embedded in the indirect. This is in your analysis. Do not lose the context, right? The context is the unspoken. It's the womb in which that verse is. So like First Peter 4:8 is in the womb. And people say this, like biblicist foundationalist Christians will say this, but at some point they stop the application. They stop acting that way. And so they'll like forget it's in First Peter 4. They'll forget it's in First Peter. They'll forget it's written by Peter. They'll forget it's in the New Testament. They'll forget that the New Testament is coming out of the Old Testament. You forget all these different levels. You forget that the Bible comes to you within the context and the tradition of the church, and ultimately all those things will come back to personal authority, which is actually in this verse because agape, because the word translated agape, love covers a multitude of sins within this verse. Is okay. Let's look at it. Covers sin, failure, great number. So So the direct word for word of like the NASB of this verse. So I navigate away from the screen, but I'm guessing you guys can still see me. Um, is above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Now, those words, right next to the NASB word for word translation, you'll have the Greek word that's translated, which very often it's way fewer words. And so like the Strong's concordance word for word translation would be like, I'll just read it to show you how crazy this is. So it has the Greek, which I can't read the Greek, and then it will have the kind of like direct translation of like that Greek root word that gets translated into a cogent sentence that can read well. So, like the Strong's translation would be like, before all or every, to have or to hold, stretched, love goodwill of himself, herself, itself, that because love, to cover a great number, a sin of failure. So, like, those are the direct words. And so, like, the word that's translated love is from the root word agape, love or goodwill. And that word is it's a little different within love because love covers a multitude of sins, but it's love or goodwill that's covered. That's both of those are within. And then the love, so agape is a feminine noun. Definition is love or goodwill, and its usage is love, benevolence, goodwill, esteem, love feast. And it says properly, the word studies is love which centers in moral preference. Agape focuses on preference. Wowza, huh? Wowza. Preference, to prefer. So then a couple more points from the first Peter verse. So love covers. The word cover is this whatever. It's word number 2572 kalupte. It means to cover, which is like it's akin to kalube, which is like a hut or a cabin. So it's like a dwelling. So like if you look at this to cover word, it means properly to cover, to keep secret, hidden, covered over, concealed. So within that Barfieldian fossil, you have love. So this preference, you have a preference to cover, to keep hidden, to overlook, and also a dwelling. There's also like a ground to this. It's a dwelling. It's a place to be. So love is this preference to have a place to be that covers and keeps hidden a multitude, a plethora. I think the uh, plethos is the word that's translated the multitude, a multitude, a crowd, a great number, an assemblage, a fullness, a throng, quantity. So you have a preference to keep hidden and cover and create a dwelling for a great throng of what? Hamartia, sin. Again, and we talk a lot about missing the mark, but this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll open this up. So hamartia is a feminine noun derived from not, from from uh, it's like not, and then meros, a part and a share in. So properly, it means no share, not a share of. So this sin is like to not have a share in. So a loss, a forfeiture, not hitting the target, a mark. So like an arrow hitting the mark, hitting the target has a share in the target. But the sin is when you miss that and you don't have a share in the target. So love is to have a preference, to make a dwelling for, and to forget, or to choose to remember no more. Like what's that verse in the Psalms, right? He will remove his sin from you and cast him as far as from the east is from the west, and he will not remember your sin. And he will forget your sin. Love covers a multitude of sins. It makes a dwelling for a place to forget where you have missed the mark. And then what does that do? It makes the not mark part of the mark. It makes a place to be for the things that don't hit the mark. It is it is an election of the excluded. Again, what is the unity outside of election? Election for inclusion. Um, and I think, and whatever. This is all words. This is all philosophy. But like, that is forgiveness, right? And forgiveness is probably the rule that can withstand its own judgment. In order to really love someone, you have to forgive them. You have to overlook sins. You have to remember their sins no more. You have to make a space to be a dwelling for the multitude of their failings and shortcomings, because we all have them. And that is arguably the ground of all being. And it's fundamentally personal because it's rooted in that agape, which is a preference. And a preference, to have a preference is like it needs me to have a preference. It needs you to have a preference. Um, all right. I mean, I think that's I think that's most of what I got. I don't know. I've been going a long time, just kind of by myself with some of your so I will put out the link. I will go and look at some of these comments. I welcome all comers. Charity, yes. Ups, I cannot read Greek, and I don't know it well enough to relate that to which word I was talking about. Um, yes, this is the conversation I'm talking about. It's in the description on YouTube, but it'll say Dynamics of Modern Paradigm Shifts with Jordan Hall. One thing I would say on that though is like part of my iconic thinking versus iconic vision, because vision is just about the seeing. Iconic thinking is about how we see our thoughts. It's a very abstract thing, but it's treating our thoughts as icons. It's not being married to your ideas. It's learning to the way that I'm thinking about it, and this is why imagination and play. This makes me think of who's the play guy that Grail Country just spoke to. What's his name? Shoot. I can see you with your curly hair, but I don't follow the Vervaeke stuff as much. Rafe Kelly, thank you, Dolly. So, but this is why play is so important, and childlikeness is so important, which is that verse, like become like little children. It's the learned ignorance. It's the childlike play. Is like it's why fairy stories are important. And again, it's like a fairy story. Read read a fairy story. Read Lilith. Read whatever, and you'll come away from a fairy story, or read an old Grimm's fairy tale, and you'll say like, what's the point? There seems to be no point here. Yeah, maybe the non-point is the point. Maybe it's teaching you, maybe it's an exercise in your imagination and your the imaginal, your organ of consciousness that is creating a new way of apprehending the world. That's a very Heideggerian thing that I think Terrence Malick is doing in his movies. He's not trying to give you a point. He's trying to change the way you apprehend reality. It's what fairy stories do. And that's why George MacDonald wrote them. This is why C.S. Lewis said, like, he wrote fiction to get past this, and this is why fiction is greater than and more true than true, like Jordan Peterson is saying. Which also, guess what, PVK? I've been saying since for years. I said this before Jordan Peterson said it. Fiction is better than nonfiction because it gets past the watchful dragons in your mind. It gets past your ego. It gets past your egoic knowing, your egoic knowledge, your label. You're not saving the appearances label that you've put on something, the credo that you've elevated above the religio because you don't treat the label as an icon. And so, like C.S. Lewis, even in his book, The Magician's Nephew, which I kind of want to reread, Lewis's Space Trilogy has influenced me a lot. The deeper I go in the world, or and the more that I live in life, I was kind of misspeaking there, but I also wasn't. It was a Freudian slip that was correct. The deeper I go into the world, the more I realize how good the space trilogy is, or the Chronicles of Narnia are. Because then the Magician's Nephew, which is one of my, or the origin of one of my favorite quotes, "What you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are." There's a magic ring that there's a couple magic rings, and they take you into this world, this forest that's filled with pools, and you can go into these pools, and all these pools are portals to other universes, other worlds, one of which is Narnia, which is where the rest of the series plays out. But like we need to become like little children that have an imagination that can put on a magic ring and go, because like if you're always looking for the point in everything, you're you're not you're not going to be able to do any of this stuff. You're not going to put the ring on because you're going to be like, what's the point of putting on the ring? You're going to be trapped in a prison made of thought. You're not going to see the world as iconic and go into other pools and play because you're going to be too scared. But a little child, they don't have that kind of fear. They're just rolling with stuff. And that's what fairy stories do. It's just like, is it night? Is it day? Is it dream? Is it waking? Who cares? Let's rock and roll. Or it's like Piranesi is another great example. Dad, what is up, my boy? You
What's up, dude?
you have things to say, like crazy rambles.
Oh yeah, you're hitting on my favorite topic,
Okay,
or one of my favorite topics, which is the imagination. Um,
dude, for sure.
I think I get it. I have the sense that the imagination is something like the actual foundation of reality.
Yes.
Personally.
So you told me a while ago that you were um, I don't know, something hit you like an epiphany, which you were having a hard time articulating, which is how this always works.
Yeah.
That's that Cormac McCarthy quote about the known being embedded, nested in the unknown. And so he says, like, when you get that idea and you're like, oh, what is that? How to say it? You have
Hmm.
a pre-verbal, unconscious idea that you can't label, right? Well,
Right.
that's where everything lives. That's the dream. That's the imaginal. But I think what I think of the imagination as
Hmm.
is the imagination is your organ of perception that plays in the memory of being, which is both past and present and future. That's the Emoria. That's that quote from Augustine from some live streams before. And that your imagination is what does that.
Hmm.
But if you're this is where I think we are in the problem of modernity, is that we are so, and I think this is what the honest postmodernists were right about. We or Ian McGilchrist, we're so hyper left brained, we're so focused, and this is like honestly the Barbie issue. The reason the Barbie conversation frustrated me so much with Trip and Sam is they
Hmm.
kept just being like, "What's the point? What's the point?" And I'm like, "The point is that way of being in the world is what is missing the point."
Which one is which side of the brain is the one that tries to do all the reasoning? The one
Left.
that, yeah. So like when when they do that experiment where they blind the one side of the brain from, or they separate the brain,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
The
then
the
like
yep.
and then you ask like, well, why did you say that? And then it'll tell you all, like try and give you all these reasons why it said it.
Mm.
Like tries to rationalize why it'll defend its position basically.
Huh.
It'll be because you're like, well, why did you say that it was an airplane when it was a dog? And it'll like try and like give some like reason that it's supposed to make sense. And like I was thinking about like that's when I say we've reduced the imagination down to the word imagination. That's what I mean. It's like
Mm.
so much bigger than the word imagination,
Yeah,
right?
you've it's lost its iconicity. You've forgotten that it's an icon. All
Right,
words are portals to something else. All sentences are portal to something else.
right. So yes, because like when we think of imagination, we think, oh, that's sweet. That kid's over there playing, you know,
Yeah, which is
sandcastles.
pride, by the
Right,
way, and arrogance.
right. That's the exact same thing I'm talking about. That's the left brain trying to convince you that, oh, there's some reason why that kid is uh, playing, sandcastles. Like as if your little explanation is going to make sense.
Mm.
It's like, so that's what I mean. We reduced imagination down to this simple word called imagination, which is that's not how we experience it. I mean, that's why I agree with you, and I've been saying the same thing. You can fit far much more information into a fictional story than you can in in like a like some sort of paper that you'll write that'll show you how to build your couch or something, an instruction manual. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, and that's
although it's appropriate, instruction manuals are appropriate, but when everything becomes an instruction manual, then
yeah, it's
yeah,
appropriate. But here's the thing. I don't know. So riffing off that, it's true. Like the instruction manual to build the couch is what that is attempting to do is to make generic skill and artisanry and craftsmanship so that anybody can do it, right? But the
right,
problem with that is like there's no creativity and beauty to it, which is fundamentally different than like a custom artistic couch maker. So like what happens in making IKEAing the world and getting instruction manuals where you can build your own shelf from Home Depot or Walmart or Amazon is that you live in a world of shit consumeristic products that have no beauty.
Right.
So
I,
that's also a trade-off, because there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs in your closed circle of the serpent. So if that's the game you want to play, where like even at that, like, because people, I don't know, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine when people, so I don't know, this, we'll take this in a little bit of a different direction. When people are like, you know, I these are all these byproducts of modernity that we don't like, and we need to move past these things of modernity. But like, we like all the stuff it's given us, right? Like,
no, we don't. Don't lie.
no, exactly, exactly. I knew you would get this, Chad, because here's the thing. I was saying this to my son the other day. We like, when people are just like, I don't want to go to a medieval dentist. The reason that you like modernity right now, and like Joe Rogan will say, like, I like my life. I would love to just like, he'll say, reincarnation
Medieval
doesn't really
dentist.
scare me, because like I'd love to live this life over and over and over. That's because you have your life, buddy.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what if, when this, that's not to like, part of that's your attitude toward it. Like, you can be in hell and have everything too, but like, what if most of these modern people that say that kind of stuff, like the Steven Pinkers, like, we're living in the best time in history, what if
Mhm.
instead of being the rich, affluent person that goes around talking that everybody like thinks is great for the most part, and that has all these modern conveniences and is flying on airplanes and eating food at nice restaurants and has clothes and is warm, like, what if instead of all that, you're the shadow side of it, which is like the prostitution and pollution and child trafficking that's on the other side of the world, that is the shadow side of all your comfort and convenience. What if you had that life? Then is modernity great? The stuff that we've shoved under the rug and outsourced, that we don't have to deal with it, so that we can have our modern conveniences.
I would say maybe. Maybe it is. Maybe those people. Um, yeah, it's a tricky one because I don't think you can really just say, would you like to have that life? It's like I don't know, because if you would have asked me, uh, you know, tw 12 years ago, would I have my life? I would have said yes, and even though it was chaotic. Now, would
Hmm.
I want to go back to living that life? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And if you would have asked me at that time, so here's the life that you're gonna have. You're gonna in 10 years, 12 years, whatever, you are going to be a homeowner. You're going to be a husband. You're going to have two dogs. You're going to have a company vehicle, a 40-hour work week, and you're going to be a member of a Lutheran church.
Hmm.
Um, and you're going to be um, scrambling to be of service to others more often than not. Would you like that life? And I would have said, fuck no. Because it doesn't make any sense. Like that. It's like that makes zero sense to me. Why would I want that life? I have this life where I get to play music and like get drunk as often as I would like, and like people like me supposedly, uh, and I'm going places, and I don't have any responsibility. So
Yeah.
yeah. But then if you would have asked me when I was like 10 years old if I would want the life that I have, I would have said absolutely not. Please end my life now.
Well, and you know what, Chad? Like, even that, even this question of would you rather live 500 years ago or now or whatever, that is still all within the analysis, the either orness of judgment, right?
Hmm.
And it's a denial of what I'm saying about the identity of identity and not identity. Is like, heaven and hell are present 500 years ago, in the
Yeah.
same, existentially, the same way that heaven and hell are present now, right?
Hmm.
This is why, like, somebody can be objectively, right, people would say objectively, in some kind of hell,
Hmm.
and it can be like heaven to them. This is a hidden life, right?
Right.
Like, this is like, you're in prison, and it's just like, just do this and you can be free. I am free. Or it's his judge, right, the scene that you love to talk about so much, who's
Yeah.
judging him falsely, and then he forgives and doesn't judge in return, and is essentially manifesting the Father forgive them, they know not what they do. And then at the end, the judge, the one who's in the position of authority that people would choose, the not in jail, the one doing all the judgment, the righteous, wants to sit in the seat of the condemned.
Oh, yes. Desperately trying to see what it is he sees.
You guys still talking about the imagination?
Oh, yeah. Who's this?
Yeah,
now?
kind of, basically.
Who is this?
This is Luke.
Oh, what's
Hi,
up? Luke?
Chad.
Hi, buddy.
How you doing?
Good.
This beautiful man that has not shaved his facial hair since he was in high school.
I just trimmed it.
Did you?
Yeah, I've never fully shaved.
Okay, well.
You can be right and be wrong and be wrong and be right.
Oh, we're getting lots of comments on the hottest, cutest little babe in this show.
Oh, I know. I've got my fresh one right here. She's got to develop her imagination.
Yeah, still has the heavenly aura on him. You know, try to smell it. Does it still smell heavenly?
Oh yeah, it's yeah. That new baby smell is unbelievable. You miss it, you know. But I was gonna say, I honestly, when you guys were talking about the imagination earlier, I honestly think the imagination is that which does incarnate from a pre-conscious state. So I guess what I'm saying is that in that that unconscious or pre-conscious, I like pre-conscious because it seems like that's emerging from a state of the unconscious into consciousness. But yeah, I would say that which actually does bring about a new creation in the world. I think that is the operation of the imagination.
I can jive with that.
Yeah, I like that. The things that pop to mind when you say that are I don't know, it's some saint quote, but it says like whatever is not assumed is not redeemed. Or like whatever is not what is it? Dang it. I wish I could
It's on the
remember.
tip of your tongue? Is it on the tip of your tongue?
It is on the tip of my tongue, but it's essentially.
You should stick your tongue out and let people read it.
I have a little short tongue that my family and my wife like to make fun of me for.
No.
You were heard. They're laughing because they heard you. Be careful with your voice, you little sneakster.
Well, what you guys were saying about even like the pulling out the map to the house, what is it called, the building plans, or
Blueprint.
following the blueprints, or the instruction manual, like, yeah, that I suppose you could still be functioning within an imaginative state when creating something like that, but it's not. Yeah, it's you're following somebody else's level of like mastery in that sense. It's not your own mastery. Like if you were to approach building a home without any knowledge of building a home, what would that creation look like? I'm sure you would get some things right following your intuition. I'm sure you'd get a lot of things that may not hold to the structural integrity that engineers have come to declare as the end-all be-all of what needs to take place in a home in order for it to be safe for insurance companies and whatever else. But like, that's like Sherry. I listened to that conversation with her and Rafe Kelly that they did maybe like a week and a half ago, and she was talking about building forts in the woods. It's like that's where it's at, man. And then you're testing the structural integrity of that fort by like jumping up in it and falling 10 feet, and you're in a state of play. Mm-hmm. So that's where like you're allowing your intuition to bounce off of like the your sensory emotional states interacting with this material in a concrete reality, but it's completely organic. It's just emerging.
Yeah. What you make me think of is this is an illustration that I got from my friend Sarah, who said essentially, like, she used the illustration of, let's just take this phenomenon of like cooking, right? And you have recipes. Well, I mean, there was a time people have been cooking since, I mean, forever, as long as human beings have lived to whatever degree. And the recipes have not always been part of that phenomenon, right? And very often when people are cooking, they'll sit there and they'll follow a recipe, but everybody knows, like, the people that make the best food are not following recipes.
Oh my god, yeah. Like, dude, I watched this
I don't know.
super nuanced sourdough guy the other day. He does like 3-hour sourdough videos. Like, you can go watch a like 5-minute sourdough YouTube video and figure out how to do it.
Hmm.
But like these artesian sourdough loaf makers, oh my gosh, it is like the most intricate, like intimate relationship with the dough, and it's all like, he keeps on telling you, like, you're not gonna, if you approach sourdough and you think you're gonna make 3 loaves and figure it out, no, you need to do this for like 100 loaves a day for like 5 years, and you'll finally figure out how to make like a decent sourdough loaf.
Dude, for sure. Or like beauty, and I guess, there's always these fields of exceptions and rules, but like in general, if you're making something that's true, good, and beautiful,
Yeah.
like you're not gonna do that without uh, embodiment, without incarnation, without skill, without practice. It's not just you can't just take the formula
Yeah.
and instantiate that without the fullness of memory, which is
Well,
initiation.
that's interesting that you bring in the memory too, because it's like how I approached it yesterday is not going to be the way I approached it today,
Hmm.
because the temperature is different. The wind's blowing in a new direction. All the conditions that I find myself in have changed, and so now I've got to adopt a slightly new angle to achieve the whatever the goal might be.
Hmm. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Anthony, I think this is true. Like, I don't know about that. They usually have a recipe, but they know how to deviate it. I would say yes, because having a recipe has become normative. But like, I don't know, go to some like really ancient island off, the coast of Italy, where there's some like 90-year-old grandma. She ain't using a recipe. She's not. And she's making killer
But she
food.
started with one.
I doubt it.
You don't think so? You don't think her grandmother showed her how to make it?
I think she showed her how to make it.
That is a recipe.
Well, I'm saying a recipe is like an IKEA stepwise propositional follow this pattern. She's I'm t- she I mean, if you want to use recipe figuratively, then sure. There's a recipe of like, get your hands in this dough, you
Well,
know.
it's the
I want
difference.
to say something real quick, but I'm going to mute and then I'm going to come back because I have something I want to say about this. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
There's something in regards to the way in which, okay, sourdough for an example, or uh, whatever let's say you're spinning fiber or yarn or something like that, or you're gardening, where like the the way in which you're learning is not you imposing your knowledge onto the task at hand, but it's the matter itself and your engagement with the matter that's actually teaching you. And so like you
Yeah.
put yourself at the feet of whatever it is that um, you're trying to learn. So like now that thing is, you're not mastering it. In a sense, it's mastering you. I don't know how to say
Dude, this is how you say it. It's a Jesus hierarchy, where the higher serves the lower. That's what it is. You are putting yourself in submission to. You're not counting quality with God something to be grasped, but made yourself nothing, even unto death. when you're learning the recipe. That's the child mind. You have to enter into that to know and to learn. And again, like I'm not trying to make the false binary between recipe, no recipe, or steps, no steps. I'm playing in the dynamism and the relationship that is outside of that thing. But if you go into hyper recipeism, propositionalism, like that thing was eventually gonna collapse and die.
Yeah. And you lose the play element, the thing that made it
Totally.
enjoyable and fun, and what kept it alive inside your heart and soul or whatever. It's gone, and
Yep.
then you don't enjoy it anymore. So even like someone like Wendell Berry, who talks a lot about like a theology of work, he completely makes it synonymous with a theology of play, where like the that where the blessing, he would twist it in a much more nuanced way than simply saying the blessing becomes or the curse becomes the blessing. But like that is truly what that's the inversion that's taking place when work does become play. It's like I don't know.
No, totally, man. And what it makes me I was just saying this to Cal yesterday when he was giving me some of his heresies on Signal, and I said this, and I'm actually not even kidding about this. I told Cal, I said, like, people that are doing this, what we are doing, are the only people doing theology. I'm not like the people that are doing it in academia are wasting their damn time because they're not playing, they're not having fun, they're too scared. Confessionalism has made them bound to it's recipeism.
Yeah.
That's what confessionalism is. Like you can't say what you think. You can't actually agape things, which is preference, again, because you don't even know what your preference is. You're binding yourself to intellectual groupthink. You can't play there.
So I have this thought. Okay, I want to hear that. I saw him just mute himself, so I'm ready.
So this has been on my mind for a little bit. So I was actually talking with Gavin this morning about this. We were talking about I was when I went up to the Ironwood, Michigan for my wife and I to go on vacation, and we went to this place that they make these hats called Stormy Chromers, which are like these cool hats or whatever. Anyways, so we went to the factory there where they make them, and I got some backstory on how they made these, like the story on the hat and all this stuff. And I thought this is fascinating, and I started to become fascinated in the town of Ironwood, Michigan, and so I was like looking at it, and it said this town has a Carnegie Library, and I was like, what the hell is a Carnegie Library? I have no idea what that is. So I looked that up, and it brought me to this book that um, my wife suggested uh, called Tycoons. And it's a story of how uh, Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and then this other guy, I can't remember his name, how they invented or created the American super economy. Fascinating book, because you would think it's about them, but it isn't about them. It's actually about us and the things we're talking about right now. And um, one of the things that struck me the first thing that struck me was this guy, I can't remember his name, John something. He basically discovers or invents um, standardization in machinery. The American Armory they had a desire that their weapons would be able to be, the parts would be able to be interchanged. Um, like you should be able to take 5 of the same guns out of like in all of the batches that are made and be able to interchange all the parts. Well, nobody could do it. They were like really struggling to make this happen. And one guy ends up finding a way to do it, and he ends up getting hired by the military to do this. So he can't patent anything because he's working for the military, and he gives his entire life to do this. And when it actually happens, it blows everybody's mind. Like, and they still weren't happy with him, right? But he does this where they pull like 5 different guns from 3 different years from 2 different factories, and they can do this interchanging parts. And it blew everybody's mind. And they called it Armory Standards. So that's the birth of Armory Standard, which later went into like the sewing machines and other machine factories. This starts something where I think it starts to shape kind of a mentality in the West that people can be standardized.
Ugh, yeah.
And I think we see this happening. Churches are constantly trying to do this. They want the standardized Christian, much to Luke's point on confessionalism and stuff like this. But it actually happens in the overall culture in general, and it becomes a part of who we are as people, which is very, very strange. The other thing that happened that was huge was somebody was mixing a batch of soap to sell that worked at Procter and Gamble, which was not that big at the time, and they accidentally make a bad batch, and they couldn't throw it out, and they were freaking out. They're like, "Oh my God, this is a terrible batch," and so they can't throw it out, so they have to sell it. So they go to sell it under a name called White Soap, and then somebody up at the company said, "Well, we're going to sell it under that, but I'd like to put it up against this other brand name. We're going to call it Ivory Soap." Well, Ivory Soap outsold White Soap, even though they were the same exact soap. Now, what's significant about this is that everybody and their mother would be making soap at home.
Yeah.
And they ended up taking soap out of the hands of people, not just Americans, but people in general in the West. And it became this thing where now you don't have to make soap. In fact, you don't even know how to make soap. And you don't even know how to make your own clothes now. Like, there are so many things that we don't know how to do, which were common day, everyday things.
And that's like 150 years.
Yeah, it wasn't even that long ago. And it changed everything. So in the process of standardization and commercialism, we lose our imagination. And I try to walk softly around this commercialism bit because I'm not anti-capitalist, but man, because part of me wants to rail against, don't say anti-commercialism. That's stupid and irresponsible. But it's like, yeah, but is it? Because like I don't even know how to make soap.
Well,
And here's the other weird thing. If you want to know where we have all of our television stories right now on television, they all come from soap operas. Who do you think was making soap operas? Procter and Gamble, who sold you Ivory Soap.
Oh, snap.
Okay, so let me tell 2 stories.
No,
Okay, fine.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I'd love to hear them.
First story, my last name, Faturachi, right? My great-grandfather, this was right at around World War II. I think it was a little bit before World War II. In Iran, they decided everybody has to register for last names because nobody had last names before that, at least not in the Jewish community. But the government mandated you have to get last names. And my great-grandfather went to register for last names, and he wanted to be called son of Elijah. His father's name was Elijah. And when he went to register for that, the registrar told him that his younger brother had already come and registered. And if you wanted to register with the same last name as somebody else, you had to get written permission from that person. So my great-grandfather, who was even more ordinary than I am, really found this difficult. But he went to his younger brother and he said, I need you to sign a letter saying that I can be the same last name. And his younger brother, so my family apparently for many, many generations has been cloth merchants. And his younger brother told him, you have to get a bolt of fatura, which I, growing up, was always told it was just an expensive type of cloth, right? Fatura cloth, and I'll sign the paper. So the story goes, my great-grandfather got a bolt of fatura, threw it at his younger brother, and named us Faturachi, which means person who sells fatura. Now, for many years, I was wondering, what is this fatura cloth? And I was talking to somebody who actually knows Turkish, and I told him this story. And he told me where fatura comes from. Fatura is actually Italian. And which is kind of funny because all my life people kept on telling me, your name sounds Italian. And I was like, no, it's not Italian. The suffix chi means person who sells. Fatura is short in Turkish for manifattura, which is Italian for manufactured.
Oh.
Because despite the fact that we think of like manufactured cloth as being something that's less great, the fact is, go ahead and try making your own cloth. Unless you're actually really good at it, you're never going to make a cloth that's as sturdy and as, you know. So that's the first story. Second story. I asked my grandmother why, when she stopped having separate milk and meat dishes. We're Jews, right? And Jews traditionally have separate meat and milk dishes. And she told me when she was a kid, she used to spend her entire day with all of the other women, taking things down to the river and washing them and bringing them back. Clothes down to the river, washing them, bringing them back. Dishes down to the river, washing them, bringing them back. And she told me when she finally moved to a city with indoor plumbing and there was hot and cold running water inside of a kitchen, her entire life changed because she no longer had to spend the entire day dragging things down to the river to wash them and bring them back. And so when some of the more modern people in our family told her, oh, we don't do separate dishes anymore. You can wash them in hot water now. It's fine. She figured this is like an entire different world, right? So she also, you know, she also changed that. So yeah, I understand the desire to like go back to, you know, simpler times and artisan things, and right. But then I'm an immigrant to the United States. When I came to the United States, all I wanted to know is, why is my life now so much better than it was before I came to the United States? Why did I live in such a shithole country? And I did live in a shithole country. And why is it the first day we came to the United States, we went to, I know the exact Ralph's we went to. Ralph's is Kroger's here in California. And I remember walking into the produce department, and there were these stacks of fruit, and they were all the exact same size. They looked all the same. They were all clean. There wasn't a bit of mud on a single one of them. And I didn't understand what was going on, because when you go to a greengrocer's in any other country, right? You have to wade through the rotten fruit and the good fruit and the right. And we have grade A apples and grade B apples, and they're all washed and completely, and you know, and I just didn't understand how somebody could spend all of that time to just wash all of the apples and all of the oranges and arrange them so neatly and make sure they were all the exact same size. It just, I didn't understand how that could be. It was just wondrous to me.
Can I say something about your grandma going down to the river?
Sure.
So I would imagine that this took place in a time or a period of time where labor and leisure, the lines between them, if we were to differentiate them, were completely blurred. And so in her experience, maybe she, in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, you can be like, oh my gosh, this is saving so much time and energy and effort, and it's extremely efficient and expedient. And these are all terms that we value in a modern industrialized, world that we live in. But I do think that there's blind spots where we didn't what was she encountering on her walk down to the river? Did she see the birds? Did she have an intimate relationship? Did she know their calls? Could she identify birds without even seeing them?
Okay.
Stuff like that. I know that that's nostalgic and all that, but
it is. That's precisely what it is. You're. So Michael Schellenberger is. I highly recommend, if you haven't spent time listening to him, listen to him. Because what?
I think I give up on him.
Well, really?
No, I listened to a few
okay.
Or whatever.
Because so he's one of these guys who grew up in California as this really left-wing guy, and at 16 he decided he was going to be like this green communist, environmentalist guy. And so he decided to go all over the world and spend his time with the people in the rainforests and things like that, right? And he has a very particular view I highly recommend actually listening to. I mean, I hear, what my grandmother really missed out on? Going down to the river with all the other women and spending the day while they were washing, talking to each other and being together with each other. And that's why I think when on Bridges of Meaning we had the women sitting around knitting, that was one of the most beautiful things that ever happened on Bridges of Meaning, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, I think it would have been much better if it was people sitting around in an actual room knitting together. But they don't have to be knitting with their own homespun, their own homespun thread like Sherry does, even though Sherry was. I don't know if you know Sherry. You must know Sherry. Luke, this may be the first time I've spoken to you.
Possible. But no, I did in a series on the imagination.
He's done lots of conversations with her.
Okay, so Sherry, she makes her own wool from grass. She takes grass and she turns it into sheep, and she turns it into wool, and she turns it into clothing, right?
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing, and I want there to be people who know how to do that. But at the same time, I want to live in a world of Fatura cloth where I don't have to, because I remember my grandmother used to make our clothes. She used to make our blankets. She used to make, and I loved my grandmother, and my grandmother did a fine job. But you know what? The sweaters she made did not last like the sweaters you go buy in a store.
So
Well-
this is the reason why I bring all this up. It's not to cry for a desire to go back, because I actually really like my job. I like these coveralls that I have. I like all this stuff. What I think the importance of talking about this stuff and bringing it up is like to remember where it is that we came from.
And where we're going.
And yeah, and where we're going. Because like, here's the thing. I mean, I think we're always blind to the wild card that's out there, because nobody thinks like, oh, like the power can get shut off. Really? Like, you don't think the power can get shut off, or at least you don't think about it. Good.
Toilet paper, COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of nice we don't have to think about it, but that's why stories are important, I think, to remember these things. It's fascinating to me, because the thing is, we don't see how fast we moved. We really don't. I mean, to think even 100 years ago, there were many, many people in America who did not have power. It's insane. And now we're just like, yeah, whatever, power.
Okay, so Dave says here, like, I don't know, I can see both sides of this. I would love to have a guitar made by a master luthier, but it would probably be like $5,000. I can buy a mass-produced guitar for $700 and actually own a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but this is like, what's that Thomas Sowell quote, which is in my thing? Like, there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Right.
The implicit trade-offs of your $700 guitar are nasty. I would say.
See, that's
It depends on how much you care about what kind of guitar you have. I have a $100 guitar. It does me great.
But Chad, you have a guitar. See, this
You're
is
not seeing the trade-offs, though.
No, Luke, you're not seeing the trade-off. There's the trade-off is no guitar or a guitar.
But it's not just
Yeah,
that.
it is. without industrialization, you would not have a guitar. You would not have a home. You would be living like in the shithole that I was. And living in a shithole sucks. There's a reason people come to the United States. There are trade-offs, but you know what? There are things which are obviously better. That's why people come to the United States. Nobody's trying to. I had to escape from Iran and try to come into the United States. Apply. We waited for 8 months to be allowed into the United States. There's a reason people move from Iran to the United States, and only absolute idiots move from the United States to Iran.
But so what I'm
if
trying
to move to Iran, you can, Luke. You can try it. You will hate it. I promise you.
Well,
I don't know. First
you know
thing
what
about Iran.
I moved to a house that was falling apart and that was built in 1850 that I needed to renovate in order to even live in. And it operates on a boiler that's 50 years old. And there's all these like weird things that, like, I'm choosing a life that is, I mean, not nearly as difficult as living in a yurt or, a tent somewhere. But I'm deliberately seeking things that are, honestly, I'll tell you what it is for me is I got super depressed, and then I went to counseling. I did the whole antidepressants thing. The best thing I ever did was just like, okay, I'm going to grow some potatoes this summer. And then I did, and I experienced so much joy in that process of growing potatoes. It was like, okay, why don't I do this every year from here on out? And why don't I add more vegetables to that? And why don't I actually just like, I don't know, supply most of my food through the growing shit in my backyard? And then it gets into more artesian stuff. Like, oh man, and it's not even artesian at that point. It's just like, this is what's bringing me joy. And that's why I'm doing it. It's because I was so depressed in the modern industrial, commercialized, technocratic, whatever, that I'm like.
But okay, I completely understand that. And
maybe it's all privilege. Maybe it's all privilege. I don't know.
See, that's part of the thing. It is. It really is. It really is, because you have the privilege of it's not just like, if your crop fails, you're not going to starve.
No, I'll go get a job.
You'll go get a job, or you'll go buy things. If you can't find, like, you're not actually. Have you seen the $600 sandwich video?
No.
You need, okay. There's a video on YouTube. Here, I'll pull it up. $600 sandwich. Oh, sorry, I was wrong. It's not 600. It's 1,500.
I might have to get going here. Got the babe to attend to.
Hey, pull up my screen, Luke. So this guy actually made a sandwich from scratch, and he didn't actually make it from scratch. You can actually see it took him 6 months and $1,500 to make a single sandwich from scratch.
Hell yeah.
Because
that's the value of every sandwich.
True cost. Plug for my live stream, True Cost.
And the fact that, like, I hear, I mean, when I was in Minneapolis, Luke was saying we were having the exact same discussion. And I hear, okay, yes, there's a lot of great things that we have not been prioritizing. We haven't been making, but this idea that life is a zero-sum game is just plain false. It's not that all things are equal and you only have trade-offs. Some things are just genuinely better and worse.
Gage.
How's it going?
Speak to us.
Well, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about, like, how we think about, how our, like, basic idea of thinking about time is like a straight line as opposed to a circle, and how traditionally everyone thought of time as a circle. It's like, as we go through cycles, and so in relationship to this, like, even this conversation seems so demonstrative of where we are in the cycle, right? So we're on our way down. If you picture we're at the bottom, right, and you go up, and on the way up the cycle, it takes longer because you're kind of moving against gravity. And then once you hit the top, you start to come all the way down, and it starts to speed up. And you can see, it's so cool how you can see this analogically. Like, for example, in the year, the days get longer and longer, and then they get shorter and shorter, because time literally speeds up at the end of the cycle. And, like, you can see this at the civilizational level, where everything goes a lot quicker. And so questions like this they're so like this spot on the circle kind of a question. And so I just feel like that's important to frame this, that there isn't, in some sense, a should at like kind of an objective level. It's in terms of a recognition of the unsustainability of the direction that all of this is headed, because we don't have the wisdom. We don't have the wisdom necessary.
This is the difference between Abrahamic religion and all other religions. Abrahamic religion has a beginning of history, an end of history, and a promise that the end will be better than the beginning. That is the faith of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yeah, but we don't know how to get there.
We live our lives in order to make the kingdom of God on earth as in heaven.
But I think it's more like, I agree with you that there's a direction. It's not just a circle that goes around and around on a wheel, but I think it's more like a if we're thinking, it's like that we
Winding up.
we move along that line through cycles.
Right. Yes. But the difference is that while it's not, Doug Wilson likes to say, God draws straight with crooked lines, right?
Sherry, cover your ears.
We do believe that God in fact does. There is an arc of history, and frankly, I think it's the fact that Christians with their preterism have lost this idea of the coming of the Messiah being a good thing, which is causing some of our theological problems.
I guess for me, as a Christian, it's like I see mythologically Antichrist preceding Christ. And so therefore, when we have these conversations about the trade-offs, it seems like all of these trade-offs that we're making, moving toward, are ultimately moving toward Antichrist, and that Christ will then come and get us out of that.
The idea of Antichrist.
I don't see how it can't be that way. And so when I see these trade-offs moving in the direction where we're moving toward, like, away from sustainability, that we're just ushering in that end. And maybe, I mean, what role we play in it is a very tough thing to say. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently is like what the difference is between trying to like force renewal versus, stop people who are trying to prevent renewal.
Why the binary? Go ahead, Luke.
No, I'm not saying. I just think it's.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand and you wanted.
I was agreeing.
You're creating a binary. Look, we can't force it. Obviously, we can't force it because God is God and God rules the world. God rules the world, not Satan. God is the God of this world. And all we can do is try to participate in the good. Actually, Pajot put it best in one of his discussions with I only saw a clip. I didn't actually watch Jordan Peterson's whole Exodus seminar, but he put it best that there was a place where he was talking to Dennis Prager, and funny enough, it was Pajot explaining the Orthodox Jewish view to Prager, who being the Christian that he is, that didn't know, is he was saying if ultimately God turns the evil into good, why do you even bother, right? If you believe that both good and evil come from God, which Orthodox Jews do, and Pajot understands, right? Then there's no way I could watch that whole thing, Paul. I would have had zero hair left, and I already have zero hair left, and I don't know where I would find hair to pull out if I listened to that whole thing.
I could find a spot.
Oh, you're going to shut this down? Okay. Well, you can shut it down and we can go continue it on my channel.
Well,
Yep.
that's what my whole gripe is. Like, we were talking about something entirely different. Then Jacob had to come in and make it all about Jacob. So that's wonderful.
I'm sorry.
No, I like that you came in, Jacob, because I mean, it's just it like, things change. You got to learn how to roll with it. Love covers a multitude of sins. Like, it's all.
No, it doesn't.
It's all fine because oh man, there's a lot I could say in relation to what Jacob is saying. I don't know. I mean, I would say a lot of my thoughts on capitalism, industry, the free market, I tried to talk about that stuff in my true cost thing, which I don't know if you saw, Jacob, but like, I think,
I don't have enough time to listen to the stuff on my own channel.
No, for sure, and people don't. That's how it works. But I think what I would say as a last word for this stream is that part of part of what I would advocate, to quote the great Bill Clinton, is the last acceptable remaining form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. And I think that's kind of the problem of our age and identitarianism and confessionalism, is that we ostracize and we out. The modern heretics are those that don't affirm the proper propositions.
No, they're not.
Exactly. And no matter how you want to define it however you want. That's the pattern behind everything. And so no matter how people agree, I think, or disagree, I think we need to try to see, because it's what I said at the beginning. To predate something is to implicit is the opposite. And no matter how poorly someone is saying something, if you agape them properly, you can find truth in anything. So that's my final word.
My final word will be, Jacob, I'm sorry I was rude to you, but jeepers creepers.
You weren't rude to me.
Oh, yes, I was.
I didn't realize
You just didn't hear it.
Yeah,
It's in
I
my
didn't.
head.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Don't be sorry.
you guys,
Just
so
don't
cute.
do it again.
I'm pretty sure I'm probably gonna do it again.
Damn it!
That's good. You can make Chad a mediator. Gage, any final words?
I mean, I think it's all in between. I mean, I think I'm just trying to think about relation, and so like it's freed me in some sense to, to set up binaries when you don't have to get stuck in the binaries is actually helpful. It's not like we have to take away binaries altogether,
Yes.
because binaries, if you recognize the binaries are there to create the tension between the chords,
Yep.
then that's where you can start playing the music.
Oh,
so
sleep token.
I'm not as, it's like, because when you first realize the binaries are so problematic, if you get stuck in one of them, it's like you're kind of like, oh shoot, binaries are bad. But then you realize, oh no, like the only way to express anything is through binary. But once you stop grabbing at any of the sides, it's like, oh, this is okay. And we can now, like, the two and the one can be their own binary that, it goes on.
Yeah.
It escalates forever in some sense. So
Beautiful. All right, guys. Shut her down. Jacob, start up one. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Gage,